Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us today for our program, The Sustainability Imperative, our 3-day virtual festival taking a look at what we all can and should be doing to keep our planet healthy and sustainable. Environmental sustainability is no longer optional. It's become an imperative. With the global population slated to grow to 9 billion, leading nations of the world are prioritizing conservation of water and other precious resources, at least the smart ones are. They're focusing on the greening of energy sources to establish a new equilibrium between safe and sensible growth on one side and responsible environmental stewardship on the other. There's probably no issue more politically important, I think, than right now. We're about to talk to someone about that. The good news is that public-private partnerships abound in embracing this challenge, but more action is needed. Over the next 3 days, we'll be speaking to policymakers, practitioners in the sustainability ecosystem, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, the American Investment Council, the American Petroleum Institute, Consumer Brands Association, Xylem, Electric Last Mile Solutions, XL Fleet, and SAFE for their support of this program. We'll be bringing you to multiple sessions of programming today, tomorrow, and Friday. And you can watch all of this in separate segments or tune into specific segments, come in and watch on the website later. All of that is available to you. You can go to thehill.com/events for all the details. Each day we'll start off with checking the temperature of planet Earth, where we will speak to leading policymakers and Earth watchers who can tell the story of what has occurred on global sustainability and convey what the nation and world need to do to stop the degradation of the planet's health. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag The Hill Sustainability. We're broadcasting live. We'll take your questions throughout the program. They'll be brought to me and look forward to hearing what those may be. If you experience any trouble with the live stream, please refresh the page. That should be a quick fix. My first guest today needs no introduction on this issue. He's Governor of Washington State, Jay Inslee. Combating climate change is one of his top priorities. It was a central focus of his campaign when he ran for president last year. Governor Inslee is a co-founder of the U.S. Climate Alliance. He's made his state a leader in renewable energy. Governor, it's great to see you. I'm going to remind you that I don't know the exact interstate, but the last time I saw you was on a floating pontoon bridge with Brad Smith of Microsoft and others, and it's the longest floating bridge in the world that you led in helping to build. And what interested me was how salmon and fish friendly this bridge was. And it planted in my mind the connection between infrastructure and the environment. And I don't want to get us off the topic of climate, but I just want to applaud you and remember that day and how passionate you were that we could make better choices in infrastructure that didn't harm the earth and still solved our daily problems. But as you think about sustainability and the dashboard of what we need to do, Governor, what's highest on your list?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. This is an honor to be with this panelist, with Plug Power, Richard Trumka, and Dr. Shaw. Thank you for letting me join you. I appreciate it. What I would say is, the one message I would have is that the title of this discussion is, the sustainability imperative. I just want to make the point that all of us on this call know that it's biologically imperative. It is imperative for our health. It is imperative for our children's lungs. It is imperative to have forests and salmon and everything else. I just want to make the central point that it is also imperative for economic growth, because we know that the key to economic growth is to seize the next great thing in technological innovation. And that is clearly the revolution in clean energy that is now occurring. And we want to be ahead of that wave. When there's a wave, if you're a surfer, you always want to catch it. We've got to be on this wave. This is imperative from an economic growth perspective. That's kind of what's on my mind. I've long believed, and I know everybody on this call understands the science very well. In my state is so threatened. Our forests are burning down. Our kids can go out and play a couple summers ago because of smoke from the burning forest. Our water is some of the most acidic water in the world because of carbon dioxide acidifying our waters, which has now affected our shellfish industry big time. They've actually have to move some of their operations to grow baby oysters because they can't grow in our waters. We all know those scientific imperatives. But coupled with that, with every single bit of the downside of the information we now have about that risk, is a corresponding upside of economic growth and job creation associated with clean energy. I cannot turn over a rock in my state without finding an entrepreneur and skilled employees building that future. I was up at Anacortes the other day at an event about our climate change bill. We have two important bills we're working on this year. And met a young entrepreneur with Silfab. Silfab is a company just started scratch, kind of a garage operation. Now they're the Western Hemisphere's most efficient manufacturer of solar panels. They're just hiring another 100 people in a small town called Burlington. This is an economic imperative. That's what's on my mind this morning. Besides the beautiful morning, everybody should be in Washington this morning. It's gorgeous.
I'd much rather be with you. So, Jay, let me ask you another question. A few years ago, I interviewed John Kerry. He's one of my regular interview subjects, but it was right after the Paris Climate Accord, and he is now our envoy on climate to the world, and we have a new global summit on climate coming up in Glasgow. But at the time I talked to John Kerry then, he said, and I was having kind of what I thought would be a celebratory event around Paris and the Climate Accord. John Kerry was very sober, and he said, we can celebrate all we want, but it is not enough. It is not enough to get the remediation, to get the effects that we need to do. So let's pat ourselves on the back, but we have a lot more work and a lot more distance to go. I love the sobriety and honesty of that. And so it's great to talk about entrepreneurs. It's great to talk about this. But I guess when you think about scale and what you need to do to get the systemic change in the right direction, given all of the troubles you just laid out, are there things we're not doing that we should be doing to make this real rather than feel good?
Oh, most definitely. Look, we understand that where we are right now is grossly below where it needs to be. Very rapidly in my state, in our country, and on this entire human civilization. We are way below where we need to do as far as the pace of putting clean energy to work for us. And John Kerry is right. I'm so glad he's in this position. So we have to understand that the pace of innovation, the pace of deployment, the pace of helping consumers get access to these products, the pace of rebuilding our infrastructure so it makes clean energy as possible, all has to accelerate by several multiples, not just incrementally, by several multiples to be able to meet any scale of reducing carbon pollution that would keep the lower latitudes literally habitable. Look, we got to face the reality here. But by the next century, the lower latitudes might be in some sense uninhabitable, in the sense that it'd be too hot actually to support working in agriculture in areas near the equator. The desertification that's taking place, the mass migrations that we'll face. Yes, he is entirely right. We have to scale up our efforts by several multiples. But I don't think it does well to be daunted by that in some sense, because we can't be frozen by the nature of our challenge. I think that all of us in this, and I've been at this for a couple decades now, we every single day have to embrace a couple attitudes. One is perseverance. We got to get up every single morning dedicated to moving this ball. That's number one. And number two, I do believe we have to be armored and inspired by the scale of optimism that is appropriate to our technologically driven society. The rate of change of science and technology is unbelievably positive in this regard. I remember, 12 years ago, I brought a GM Volt to Congress to show my colleagues that the electric car was possible. And all my buddies laughed at me because when we brought it, it was just a prototype, didn't even have an engine under the hood. It was seen as, just a toy at that time. Now you got GM committing to electric vehicles. We understand that they're coming on like gangbusters. The pace of change ought to give us an ability to raise our ambition level higher than we could ever imagine. So perseverance and optimism and raising the bar of our ambitions should all inspire us every single day. It inspires me. That's why we're working so hard to make the next step that my state needs to take.
Let me ask you a personal question, Governor. I watched, of course, as we all did, the Democratic nomination process very closely, and you were out there and others, but you were probably the most forceful. Said, "This is why I'm running. This is what I'm doing." Do you think politics are toxic, right? We divide a lot of things, but I mean, part of the fact is we are where we are, and there have been both parties that have been partly responsible for where we are as a nation. Do you think you have sufficiently dented both the Democratic and I would even say the Republican psyche? But let's start with your party.
Well, I'm proud to be a Democrat because we obviously have been the party that have been advancing this cause now for some period. I'm proud to be in the same party with President Biden, who I think is doing a fantastic job early in his term. What he has now proposed is probably 90% of what I was proposing during my efforts. I could not be more thrilled about both his level of ambition and the fact that he has made this a whole of government approach. What he really gets is that in order to tame this beast, we have to have every agency of the federal government dedicated to this, and every effort has to be imbued with the climate effort. And he's doing that big time. I could not be more thrilled about what his administration is doing today. And so I'm proud to be a Democrat, and we are always trying to welcome new Republicans to this effort. We would hope that move would accelerate. Now, the last president obviously made that very difficult for Republicans, and we're hoping that there's a new horizon, and there should be, because this is an economic growth issue. More and more business leaders, many of whom have been in the Republican Party, at least until Donald Trump took it over, understand the business opportunities. British Petroleum is supporting our cap and invest bill that we are now working for in my state legislature. You just can't avoid the fact that this is an economic growth potential, and that should, over time, free up Republicans to join this effort. Now, sadly, there's very few of them at this moment, and we can't wait till they come over and start arguing. Now, there has been progress, arguing for action instead of against it. There has been progress, however, though. Republicans no longer, in polite conversation, can deny climate change. They understand that jig is up. You just can't argue that this is not a problem at this point. It's just that now they've been too an anchor dragging us against taking action for it. So we look forward to the days this can be bipartisan. We always open a hand up there. And until that day happens, though, frankly, you got to put more Democrats in office. And that's just a reality. I'm happy to say that because it's the truth.
Well, I'm pleased today with today's forum. We actually have Republicans from different perspectives on this, and we've got Democrats, of course. We've taken a wide aperture to this discussion. And in part, I did this because of a discussion that I had recently with Sheldon Whitehouse, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, whom you know well and has been active in this. And he's friends with John Barrasso of Wyoming and friends with Joe Manchin of West Virginia. And he said, we need to find ways to talk to constituencies that may not naturally feel this, or whether economic stakes are different, or people who understand that gas is a key part of any transition and sort of along these ways. And so I'm interested in your advice because doing an event like this is always going to be controversial when you bring a lot of people in. What are the best techniques you think you have to help one side that wants to yell really loudly what it feels passionately? There's another side, but get them to have some mutual understanding, to walk in each other's shoes a bit, to find, some ways to communicate about the equities at stake. And rather than having, just a slugfest, have something that over time yields some of the benefits that you just shared.
Well, I think, the Dalai Lama might be the best person to answer those kind of questions, but I have, listening is the most important thing all of us can do, and we need to listen to one another. Folks whose history has been associated with fossil fuels have anxiety about a transition, and that is a human condition to have concerns when there is change, and the change is afoot in our economy and in our societies. And change is because we're all humans, gives us concerns. And so, you have to listen to that concern, respect it, understand it, not diminish it, and answer to it. Mm-hmm. And to fashion the best way to give people confidence in their own personal lives and their communities' lives over time, to be a positive part of that change where it's positive things in their lives. And so you just have to figure out the best ways to do that. Those aren't all going to work the first couple hours you talk about it. But we do find more and more people getting over the concern about that transition. The electrical workers, for instance, I mentioned I was in Anacortes, Washington, celebrating or the potential celebration of passing a couple more of our climate bills. And the local IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, was there. And, historically, they had some concerns about this transition. Now they understand the job creating opportunities of building wind turbines and solar plants and the like. And more of our union brothers and sisters are recognizing the positive place they can play in that transition. But it's really important to address their concerns. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm proud of we have the best 100% clean electrical grid bill in the United States.
Right.
Not just because it's the most actually enforceable, but importantly because it has the biggest protections to make sure that these are family wage jobs that we are building. We have incentives for project labor agreements. We have good environmental justice provisions. And right now, if we pass our cap and invest bill, it will have the strongest environmental justice provisions to protect working families and family wage jobs, probably of any, assuredly the best in the United States. So you need to listen, you need to be responsive, and then you have to hold your hand out, understanding that old arguments should be forgotten. Let's move on.
Well, Governor, I could talk to you for hours, actually, and I'll never forget when we were on that bridge that day that it was opening. You went into great detail with me on how it got paid for, how it got done, all the issues. And so I want to convey to our audiences, while we're talking about these, clean energy by 2045 or, 2030 and these things, they require hard choices, they require plans, people got to pay for it. And I know that you're deep in the intricacies of all of that. So Governor Jay Inslee of the state of Washington, I want to thank you so much for launching our conversations today.
Thank you. I know it's going to be a brighter future. We're going to work together on this. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.